Hello, I'm Lugatorix and welcome to my Parthia faction guide for Rome Total War. Today we're going to be going through some of the units available for Parthians, their starting position, the faction introduction video, and all that sort of stuff. Basically just generally giving some advice as playing as Parthia on the Imperial campaign. So first of all, I'm going to show you the units available as Parthia, and then we'll get on to the rest of it. So here we go, this is Parthia. Now, as you can see, there aren't many units available. There isn't a great variety when it comes to Parthia, and there's a simple reason for that. It's a very, very cavalry-based faction. If you love playing with cavalry, you don't like the infantry side of the game, Parthia is definitely a faction for you. But be warned, if you like to use infantry like phalanxes or you know spearmen of any sort, there just isn't any good Parthian infantry basically, which is a disadvantage, but their Cataphracts are some of the best in the game, so keep that in mind. So first of all, Peasants, every faction has them. They're obviously, they're very, very basic units, poor morale. I'll say this every time, don't bother using Peasants in battle, it's not worth it. Next up, Hillman. Now, Hillmen are probably about as good as it gets when it comes to spearmen for Parthia, which says basically a lot about how bad the Parthian infantry is. And they're okay, they have a defense of 9, an attack of only 5, which isn't good in my opinion. The good stamina and their bonus fighting cavalry is nice, but that's very commonplace for spearmen. It doesn't make them anything special. The morale is okay, but it's not good, which again is a disadvantage. And yeah, that's all I've got to say about Hillman really. I wouldn't use them maybe to hold the front line. I mean, they probably are the best as it comes to holding the front line, possibly Eastern Infantry, but I don't rate them at all. So if you want to have a front line of some sort, Hillman is what I would go with, but don't rely on them in your army because they're not that strong. Next up, Eastern Infantry. Now, on paper they might look better. Yes, their attack is slightly lower, but their defense is it's higher, a little bit higher than the Hillman, and they are a lot more numerous, 40 more in a unit. Problem is poor morale, and I'm not joking, the morale is poor. Basically anything touches them they rout. That's what I find, particularly as mercenaries. If you hire these guys as mercenaries, they're terrible, but the only good thing about them is they have a bonus fighting cavalry, but as I just alluded to, nothing special for spearmen, so not that great. I would use Hillman over Eastern Infantry personally. Next up, Slingers. Now Slingers I quite like in the game, they're alright, but as Slingers go, these are pretty poor. Their melee attack and defense isn't good, but then they're obviously a missile unit, but the missile attack's only 4. So, not that great. And the bad thing about Slingers are they don't have a lot of ammunition, I tend to find, so they're less effective than archers. Their counterparts being archers, of course, these guys are better. The basic archers, obviously, so they don't have a good attack and defense. They are very, very basic. But the missile attack of 7 is quite good. It's decent, and they will do a job. If you want missile troops that aren't cavalry, these are the guys to go for instead of the Slingers, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're getting on to the cavalry. This is the crowning glory of the Parthian faction. Starting off with basic Cataphracts. And when I say basic, well, they're not really basic because Cataphracts are great, but you won't be able to get these guys straight away, so be warned. Although the cavalry is great, you get it later on in the game. There are a couple of Cataphracts that spawn at the beginning of the game which you can have, but you can't recruit them is what I'm saying. So attack 7 is nothing special, but their defense of 23 is very good, and the charge bonus makes their attack a bit better. The great thing about these guys is the good morale, but the key with the Cataphracts is they're very well armoured. So the defense is high, they're well armoured, they are really, really good. And as it says there, they're used as shock troops. So if, let's say, you have your infantry pinned up against another infantry, you charge in with the Cataphracts, they can take damage and they'll give damage as well. And the opposing army will be very, very afraid of them. Quite rightly so, because the Cataphracts are good. They're very good. I'd rate them very highly. Now, Cataphract Camels are very similar. They have exactly the same stats, I think. But I don't rate Camels in this game at all. I much prefer horses, which we'll get onto later as well with the Bedouins, as you can see on the right. I don't rate Camels because they're slow moving, I find. And they don't seem to be as powerful and as effective as horses, as cavalry. So Personally, I wouldn't recommend them. If you get the choice between Camels and normal Cataphracts, go with the normal Cataphracts is my opinion. Next up, Eastern General, Pre-Marin General, obviously. You know, they're pretty good, but they're not the heavily armoured Cataphract version, which you'll see later on. But attack 12, defense 15 is good, and the good morale makes them nice as well. And what I like about these guys is, unlike a lot of the other factions, the general has a missile attack as well, which I think is quite rare. Maybe not so much in the east, but a lot of factions I've played with in the past, the general doesn't have a missile attack. So it makes the general even more effective than usual, basically. And then the better version of this is, of course, the armoured Eastern General. Similar attack, but a lot better defense, and that is because they're Cataphracts. They're really, really heavily armoured. With the good morale as well, they're very difficult to take down. Which is great, because generals are very important in this game, and you don't want a general going down. If they are armoured Cataphracts, they're not going down unless something really strong. You know, you go into like a really strong phalanx or something. In which case, yeah, you're probably going to die, but even then, they can take a lot of damage. Next up, an advantage with the Parthians is that they can recruit elephants. A lot of factions, for example, the Roman factions, have to use them as mercenaries, but not the Parthians. The Parthians can recruit war elephants. Now, I quite like elephants. They're nice as shock troops. They fear a lot of people, and you can really charge them in, but obviously they can run amok if fired upon, in which case they're just completely out of control. But they have a missile attack, they have good defense, and they have a lot of hit points, which is good. So yes, the elephants are good, but they're expensive as hell. They really are expensive to maintain and to recruit. Maybe have one in an army, 1 or 2 max in an army, but certainly don't rely on elephants, because you can't afford to, literally, in terms of economy and also in terms of the battle itself. Next up, the Missile Cavalry. As you can see, this is the basic Missile Cavalry, the Horse Archers. Very, very poor melee attack and defense. Now, I'm personally not a fan of Missile Cavalry. A lot of people swear by it though, but I don't like them personally. And these guys aren't good because they don't have any melee attack at all, and the missile attack isn't even that great. So it kind of reduces their usefulness, in my opinion. Additionally, I seem to find the Horse Archers run out of ammo quicker than the normal archers. I don't know if that's just me, but that's what I tend to find. So something to consider as well. The better versions of these are the Persian Cavalry. These guys are decent because they have decent melee attack and defense, so they're more versatile than their counterparts, which aren't as good. They have a charge bonus as well, which is good for Missile Cavalry, and the missile attack is 7, so it makes them a bit more, not exactly the same effectiveness. It's okay, it's not amazing. Now, as for siege equipment, the Parthians do not get a lot. They have basic onagers, and that seems to be it. So that's very interesting. They aren't great at fighting on walls as such, and they're not great at breaking down walls, as you can see. If you don't know what onagers are, they are basically used for attacking buildings. Don't bother using them against troops unless you have them randomly on the battlefield with you, because they're very, very inaccurate. They're only accurate at hitting buildings, to be honest. That's what they're used for. That's their usefulness. Now, next up are 3 units I wouldn't bother with, but I'm going to mention them anyway because I kind of have to. I suppose I would bother with them in the sense that you have access to them quicker than the Cataphracts, so you are going to have to use them really at some point. First of all, Bedouin Warriors. So you can get these guys as mercenaries. It seems like the Parthians can recruit them anyway. These are Camels, and as I said earlier, Camels aren't that great, in my opinion, because they're not that fast. The attack of 7 is okay, the defense of 11 is okay, and the charge bonus of 4 is okay. They scare horses, which is nice, but I just don't find that effective. I personally would use the Arab Cavalry instead. Exactly the same stats, but they're faster moving. Pretty much that is the difference. They don't scare horses, but like, do the Camels really scare the horses that much? I wouldn't be scared by Bedouin Warriors on a camel personally, so I doubt that the horses are that scared of them either. So I would personally use Arab Cavalry because they're basically faster, more effective versions than the Bedouin Warriors. And then you have the Bedouin Archers, very poor melee attack and defense. The missile attack of 7 makes them sort of relatable to the Persian Cavalry. So they're basically cheaper versions of the Persian Cavalry, but they're not as good as melee. So obviously I wouldn't use them above, and their Camels as well, but it can sort of do a job if that's your kind of thing, but it's not what I would use personally. But in the early game, Parthia is difficult in the sense that you don't get access to these Cataphracts, so you're going to have to use units which are subpar, like the Hillman, the Eastern Infantry, and the Bedouins. So this is the starting screen for Parthia, as you can see. So, I will show you the faction introduction video, and then we shall get on to Parthia's position on the campaign map, and show you a bit about what's going on in that sense.
The desert is ours. It is my home. Invaders come here, but they do not leave. They do not understand the desert. They do not understand how it gives life, or how it kills. So they die, and we grow stronger. The dead, now the dead, cannot pass on their newfound wisdom. So invaders keep coming, keep trying to take our lands and our wealth. But then wealth flows through this land. And if our people have one failing, it is the love of wealth. It is sweeter than water. It is more powerful than the sword. For any sword can be turned aside with a gold coin. Gold will buy 1,000 warriors. And 1,000 warriors, why, they are the start of an empire.
Right, so here we are. This is Parthia, tucked in the very corner of the map. Now, as you can see, I have the fog of war off because just to show you what's around. I'll turn it off. I'll turn it on for a second, just so that you can see what you would see if you're playing the game legit, which is obviously what I'd never use fog of war on. I would never have the fog of war off normally, but I will turn it off in a minute just to show you what it looks like. So, as you can see, Parthia is a bit depressing because it's right tucked in the corner. You know, there's some huge massive void here, which I don't know what that is, but it's the edge of the world, I presume. And Parthia are sort of stuck clinging on to the edge of the world. Here they are. 3 settlements, I believe, all spread out over a large distance, which makes Parthia's starting position difficult. I think Parthia have it very difficult in the early game. It's a sort of underrated faction in terms of the difficulty, particularly of the early game, as I said. So, we'll start off here, and this settlement is the capital with a general in, Ardumanish, and they have an army of him, the factionaire, and 2 slingers. That's decent. That's a decent army. Slingers I'd rate, as I said, and if you look at the slingers, you know, they're okay. They'll do a job, in my opinion. But this is the main army you start off with. This army is important. So you have the faction leader, which is good. So you've got some heavy cavalry. 2 Cataphracts. These Cataphracts are vital. Do not throw them away because you can't get Cataphracts for a while. So don't throw these guys away. These guys are crucial in the early stages of the game. And then 3 Horse Archers. And Horse Archers are decent as well. So, you know, again, that's probably the only missile cavalry you'll be able to afford for a while. In terms of mercenaries, it's only Eastern mercenaries. Don't get them unless you're really desperate. So yeah, that's a decent army, and you need to get that moving quickly, which is nice. So I'll talk about that army in a second, but I want to have a look at the other armies. Next up, isolated at the top here is Sakai. I don't know how to say that, to be honest. And it's a decent army again. A family member, so heavy cavalry, which is always useful, alongside some more missile cavalry, which is great as well, and some peasants. Peasants are useless. So, what I would do with this army straight away, first of all, there isn't a lot here. You could go to all the Scythians, but I highly, highly implore you not to. There's several reasons. First of all, as many people know, going to war against the Scythians is annoying on several counts. First of all, the Scythians own a huge area of land. It literally is all of this. so it takes so long to get across the whole of Scythia. It's not worth it. The land isn't even profitable. It's very, very poor land. It's not worth it in my opinion. And also, what's annoying about the Scythians is they're basically all horse archers, and they're really hard to deal with because they keep skirmishing, and they're really fast and annoying, and they're pretty good as well. So don't go towards Scythia. If anything, get a diplomat over there and sue for peace, or an alliance rather. What I would do is, there is a ship here, and I believe this ship has been placed deliberately by the Total War team because they know this army is not needed up here. I would move these guys down south onto the ship. Yes, it makes this town unhappy. Just lower the tax rate and just do whatever to make them happy for a little bit. Put a shrine in, recruit a bit more. There's a lot you can do to make these guys not revolt. But yeah, move these guys down and move them over here. You'll need them, which I'll get to later. And then you have a third army around here, Susa, and more missile cavalry, more slingers. Again, a decent army. So what would I do with these armies? Well, I'll turn off the fog of war so I can show you where I would put them. First of all, the thing I would like to say is, and I'll say this for all the Middle Eastern factions, is the Seleucids are weak. And you should do what all the other Total War AI do for all the other Middle Eastern factions, and that's take advantage. All these factions, Pontus, Armenia, Greece, Egypt, they all take advantage of the weak Seleucids. So, attack them. And the Parthians are in a good position in the sense that they're surrounded by the Seleucids and rebels. Easy settlements to take, in my opinion. So, Seleucia is a large town with a decent sized garrison. But if you take it, you have the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, I believe, which have a boost to farming income. And as everyone knows, farming income is very important at the beginning of the game. So to have a 20% boost to your economy at the beginning of the game puts you in good stead and puts you above your rivals. So yes, I would move the army over to Seleucia. If you move this bio over to Seleucia, you can see their army is decent. Militia cavalry are okay, they're missile cavalry obviously. They have a general, a factionaire, and militia hoplites. As hoplites go, they're pretty poor because of their poor morale. We'll get to that when we discuss the Seleucids and the Peltas. So although it's a decent sized army, it should be fine. You've got a lot of missile cavalry. They should be able to deal with the slow moving hoplites. So I would move this army of Susa over to Seleucia as quickly as possible. Possibly reinforced by these guys if you're not confident. But an obvious place for these guys to start is Fraspa. Only 3 garrison. So, and they can only hold out for 2 turns anyway. So this army is way too strong to be taken out Fraspa. But take it because it's a nice easy settlement. Get it before the Armenians do. As for the Armenians, wouldn't bother going to war with them. It's up to you. But I think you're going to have a lot more trouble than the Armenians. It depends. It depends how you want to play it, really. But yeah, definitely go for Fraspa and Seleucia as early options. Now, the big problem in the Middle East is always the Egyptians. They are always the strongest faction by far. Now, there's 2 ways of dealing with the Egyptians. You can go the cautious conservative route, and that is form an alliance, be nice and friends, and then build up a huge army and finally attack them. The problem with that is, by the time you get around to that, the Egyptians will have Petra, Bostra, Palmyra, Damascus, Antioch, Hatra, and probably Tarsus as well. They'll be huge, is what I'm saying, and it's going to be very difficult, even if you have built up strong armies, to deal with the Egyptians. In which case, if you're confident, try and blitz. Now, it's hard to blitz because there's a huge area of land to deal with. The distance between Susa and Dumatha is big. And Dumatha isn't even that profitable. I would possibly ignore it, if anything. So, it's difficult as the Parthians, but your armies consist of a lot of cavalry, so you have more movement points, which is nice. I would tend to advance over to Egypt as quickly as possible. But it's not easy because of the distance. Definitely take Seleucia. Move over to Hatra if it's not taken already, because Hatra isn't that strong. I would really take advantage. I tell you what I would do. 2-pronged attack. I would use these armies to start taking Seleucia, Hatra, possibly move down to Palmyra, and then sort of intercept the Egyptians here, and you just have to build up a huge army. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. You could use this army to take Fraspa and possibly go to war with the Armenians, because they are slightly weak. They're not that strong. They're sort of a similar faction to Parthia, maybe move over to Pontus. But it's about not moving too quickly, but making progress and taking advantage of the weak Seleucids. That's really all the advice I can give. It's not easy being the Parthians, particularly in the early game, because the units are weak and there's a huge amount of land to cover. So it's something you're going to have to consider. But yeah, don't go to war with the Scythians. It's not worth it. Don't, what's this town? Like, it's well guarded and it's terrible. There's a nice diplomat there. Go and talk to him. That's my advice anyway. So that is in terms of, what I would do in terms of moving. It's not easy. Take advantage of the Seleucids is probably the big thing. Now, the final thing I'd like to look at is the religious buildings available, and also all the buildings available for the Parthians. So walls, Middle Eastern walls, relatively common, and they have the same buildings as all the rest: barracks, stables, rangers, traders, smiths, ports, farms, roads, academies. They're all the same. Law enforcement is good. I mentioned them in the Egyptian faction guide. The Middle Eastern factions, some of them get law enforcement, which is great because they get something the other factions don't, which is a public order bonus building that's just added on. So you get more public order. That's nice, isn't it? So yeah, law enforcement, the higher level, more public order bonus due to law. Caravans. Now caravans are a good thing as well because the other factions don't get them. The increase in tradable goods, it basically each level increases it more. That's pretty much it. So more trade, means more money. Coupled with the Tower of Babylon, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which increases farming income, you could have quite a bit of money in the early game, which you're going to need because you're going to need to form a big army. Now, in terms of temples, Parthia don't have many options. It is Zoroaster or nothing. It goes up to a temple complex of Zoroaster, where you only get happiness and law bonuses of 25%. In terms of religion, Parthia is weak because they don't have, first of all, many options. As the Romans, for example, you get 3 options. Depending on what you want for a town, you can choose which god, and accordingly you'll get a temple which facilitates the needs of that town. You don't have much choice with Parthia. It is happiness bonus or nothing. So obviously, go with the temples, but it's not as good because you don't get training bonuses and so on and so forth. So that's something to consider. But that's basically it for Parthia. It's just a very quick guide. It's difficult being as Parthia because there's a huge amount of land and it's such a power struggle in the Middle East between Pontus, Armenia, Parthia, Egypt and Greece, and maybe no, not the Numidians, they're terrible. So take advantage of the fact there are rebels and weak Seleucid towns around, and then just try and consolidate a force and take Egypt. I would go for Egypt before going for factions like Pontus and the region of modern day Turkey, because it's not as valuable and you want to take the Egyptians out before they get too strong. If they get too strong, you're going to struggle with them later. It's the same advice I give about the Romans. Take the Romans out as quickly as you can because they'll get too strong. And it's the same with the Egyptians. Take them out as quickly as you can because you're going to regret it later if you don't. That's my opinion. So that has been it for Parthia. I am coming out with another series very, very soon. But I will also continue with these faction guides. I hope they're proving helpful a bit at least. It's just a sort of insight into what I would do. And it gives you a bit of an overview of what it's like playing as Parthia. So thank you very much for watching. And I shall see you around. Thank you very much.